So today, actually, this room is actually we talk about brilliant mind on the stage, but I have to acknowledge that lots of brilliant minds in the audience, and I wish we have multiple days and have many of you come on stage talk about this important topic. So here, I like to in the next session to really just go through a dialogue and kind of piggyback on Kai-Fu just gave this talk. This is my third time hearing Kai-Fu's talk. It never gets bored. It gets better every time. I've been in the AI for about 28 years. Kai-Fu has been more than 35 years and started in Columbia, then CMU, and then became a professor there. And before AlphaGo actually beat human champion, Kai-Fu built a computer game, I think called Othello, and actually was on New York Times back in the late 80s. And then he came to Silicon Valley, worked for Apple and Microsoft, and went to China and come back today and share with us. And one little details I think you may not notice. In the reason one of the 5 reasons, there was a picture on the lower right. Kai-Fu didn't mention. That was a picture of a stadium. That stadium must have more than 10,000 people. And the person on the stage was Kai-Fu. So he in China is a rock star. He really packed the stadium. But I'm glad today we have this very intimate setting for you to really hear him up close. And also from Olaf, which is my long-term esteemed friend and collaborator. One thing is interesting is really with the 35 years experience, we talk about AI rapid development. I call it AI explosion. I really mean it. This is not exaggeration. Those who know me know I don't exaggerate. I felt, every one of us as AI expert became so small in this explosion. And because there's so much frontier got break open because of the advancement of new technology. As a result, it's very hard to find an AI expert who knows so much of the scope of the AI universe. From policy to the future of living, to jobs and to technology, to company. So I'm just glad that we are hitchhiking Kai-Fu's brilliant mind of his 35 years travel in this AI universe, and both in US and China, and just last 30 minutes distilled down. So obviously, read his book. I read his book, and then also it's brilliant. So with that said, I do want to devote the first question to Olaf first, and because Olaf Groth, and he has been in corporate for many years and consulting for many large companies and seeing the challenge in the corporate, and transform and innovate. And then he also is a co-author with Sean on the Bay Area innovation ecosystem years ago, and really looking at how Bay Area stay competitive and still as the mega innovation spots connecting to all the innovation center in the China, including China like Zhongguancun. And so he's really a world-renowned expert on innovation, AI, new technology, futures. So I want to ask you, Olaf, what prompted you to write this book? And with, of course, Mark Nitzberg, his co-author from Berkeley, is also in the audience. And why do you believe the message in the book is so important right now?
Thank you for the question, Chen Yang. First of all, let me express my gratitude for being here today. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be with you and to be on the stage with Dr. Li. I have read his book very carefully, and I thought it was incredibly well written and very, very educational, especially on the dynamics in China. So thank you for having me today. The answer to your question is that about 2 years ago, my very good friend, Mark Nitzberg, who is sitting over here on the right, who is my co-author, who is a serial social entrepreneur and had just sold his latest venture to Amazon, was taking a new role at Berkeley, getting back to his roots as an AI scientist. I had just taken a role heading up a research center at Hult International Business School, and we were both looking at artificial intelligence and found that the narrative on artificial intelligence was hopelessly overhyped. And primarily on the dystopian sort of Terminator and Skynet side of things. And while that's incredibly entertaining at times, it also really jaded our view to the tremendous opportunity that exists. And I think there's a lot of overlap between Kai-Fu and myself on pointing that opportunity out. So Mark and I set out to craft a book that really could open our eyes on the tremendous opportunity, not just in the United States and China, but really globally, that AI brings, not just for economic development and business development, but rather for human growth and development as well. The second reason is inherent in what I just told you, and that is that we felt that there is really no global look. So teaching at Holt International Business School, we have some students in the audience here, welcome. We have students from about 140 countries on each campus. And so we said, what a great asset to have to do some global research, because there is a lot more going on in AI than just in China and the United States. So it's a net optimistic book, but we are also believing that by looking out very far to Terminator scenarios, autonomous weapons, etc., we are also preventing ourselves from looking at the risk that is already inherent today. And in order for us to harness that short to medium term opportunity, we also have to be clear-eyed on the risk. So we believe ethics needs to be front and center and parallel to the economic opportunity exploration if we want to harness that opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Olaf. It's interesting, why I think this combination is a very potent combination, because when I read Kai-Fu book, it's actually better than reading even a science fiction, which was always my favorite genre. And it was fantastic. I read everything. And then in the end, I said, because I worked for Siemens for 17 years, I traveled to Europe a lot. And I said, but what about the rest of the world? In that book, obviously focused on the US and China, that premises, they are leading. And this is why I thought, to really give a global view. Silicon Valley, we're more global than anywhere in the world. We have, actually one statistic always I want to share is more than 50% of the startup founders in Silicon Valley are foreign born. And that's always striking my head. When I share that with many of the CEOs visiting us, and they were always shocked, right? So diversity, that's why I thought, bring Olaf in, as he has a, much global, Europe and also other regions, that really combine very well, give a more comprehensive view. So, one thing is, I actually did my undergraduate in neural network, parallel computing, and back in the, late 80s and early 90s. And when I graduated, I was very fascinated about the neural network. Everything's great, but I didn't. That was a bad timing. It's AR winter, and didn't solve any practical problem. And the only thing can do is really some toy problem plus some handwriting, writing recognition. And so I decided to pivot to the computer vision, and it was more pragmatic. But over the time, also there was a parallel on speech recognition as well. The PhD scientists were very frustrated because improvements are very little. And so we got this up and down AI wave, because AI is not new, even though suddenly show up, it's actually since 1956. And so every time when it go up, and then it went down, and next time when it go up, people said, it may go down again. But I do share, when I read both of your books, and myself included, I was looking at where AI is going, I do think we have a shared belief AI is now, also like, Omeyer, Hubbard talked about, it's real, it's no longer artificial. So I just want to ask both of you, and what's new and different this time around, and from the past, or the past up and down. Kai-Fu, why don't you take on this first?
Sure. I think the last two times were based on purely on faith or belief that AI would take off. There was some small trajectory that looked big, and then it hit a plateau. But this time, AI is really beating human in everything, not just in data-centric tasks, which we're not very good at, but also in human perception. AI is beating human speech recognition, image recognition, and I think in the not too distant future, even complex tasks like autonomous vehicle, it will drive better than people. It arguably already does for certain tasks like parking and highway. So I think when it's truly exceeding human performance and by this much, it's for real. Secondly, we're seeing the smartest people really pouring into AI. The smartest kids are all going into AI. When I talk to a company like Pinterest, half of their engineers are working on AI. Right? This is not even what you think of as an AI company. When you go to people at Stanford or Tsinghua, everybody's studying AI. It's almost sad that many other important computer science areas are not being studied because it's so hot. But when you have so many brilliant minds pouring into this area, problems will get solved. Also, so much money has poured into AI. Now, that also will create a bubble, but lots of money and lots of brilliant minds. And I think traditional companies have capitulated. If you talk to any car manufacturer, they've already accept someday this will be autonomous driving, even though no one's demonstrated it. And if you talk to any ride-sharing company, Uber or Didi, if you talk to any parts manufacturer in Europe or Germany, they've all capitulated. So I think in the place where traditional companies capitulated, smart people go in, and the technologies are good enough, and lots of money are flowing in, I think it has to be real.
Thank you. So let's turn around to Olaf. What are the reasons that you believe AI is real now? Why people, in this audience and beyond, your readers should take it very serious, no matter what jobs they're having right now. They should really, really take serious about AI. This time it's real.
Yeah, I think the reason for why this moment is special is essentially for three reasons. The first one is scale. The scale of available data is just tremendous. And we can talk a bit more about data and what it means. The second part is that I think for the first time in our lives, we are now encountering a technology that can make decisions, that can actually make cognitive decisions for us. And with that comes really the third, which is that AI is now making us think more about ourselves. And to me, frankly, that is the most important part because we are having to renegotiate our power, our trust with the people that innovate on AI and with the tools themselves. Because with the ability to make decisions comes a certain amount of leverage and power. So the companies that are running these AI systems are actually now making more and more decisions for us. They understand us in ways that we often don't see ourselves. And that can be tremendously valuable, but it is also a bit treacherous. So we need more transparency on that. But those are the three reasons for why I think this time is different, and certainly very different from the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, actually, it's interesting. You actually almost read my next question. Because we're looking at why this time is real. AI is around 60 years. A little bit over 60. And Olaf just mentioned about one of the dimensions that he was looking to with Mark is on the power, right? AI can bring to the world and to all sorts of jobs. And so if we zoom together, let's imagine we zoom out the timeline, right? Let's not look at 60 years. The humankind has been on the planet for tens of thousands of years. And let's look at maybe 500 years, right? I think both of you talk about why this time AI is not just another big trend. It's so big, right? It's a mega trend that it actually rivaled the last industrial revolution, which is actually many, many years ago. So carefully, actually said in the book, leading AI deployment will translate into productivity gains on a scale not seen since the Industrial Revolution. You said that just a minute ago. What's new about the AI technology revolution and in this longer time horizon, and why is it different from Industrial Revolution, for instance? And so maybe carefully you kind of expand on that because you didn't talk that in the talk yet.
Sure. The Industrial Revolution took a long time because infrastructure had to be built. Old factories had to be transformed. And take electricity as an example, it took well over 100 years to build out the electrical grid, so other innovations can be built on top of assuming there is electricity. And that was the serial, slow process. I mean, even today, cars are not yet electrified, right? So the electrifying of the world took forever. But AI is largely purely, for many of the applications, is purely software and can run on the clouds and can be harnessed by people who can just write software. So it will come a lot faster. The other thing that is different related to jobs is Industrial Revolution actually easily created more jobs because the very fact is instead of having craftspeople, a small number of craftspeople create a car in a long time, assembly line made many cars with many lower skilled workers much faster. But in AI, it is actually doing the work of the routine work at the assembly line. So it's both a benefit in the sense that it liberates us from routine work, but it's also a challenge because it's not automatically creating jobs as it improves productivity. The job creation will come later, and it's hard to predict. So industrial revolution has been great for job creation. AI, I think, is more questionable and may take longer.
Okay, so Olaf, you also mentioned industrial revolution. How do you see? Why do you compare, AI revolution with industrial revolution? I mean, we know it's a massive scale, right? And what's your views on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree with Kai-Fu on the speed. This is coming at us much faster than we are likely able to adapt. And the Industrial Revolution took some time. It was very capital intensive, and capital came in the form of machinery and property and factories. This is coming in the form of software, bits and bytes, and it's coming in the form of new ventures and applications that you can proliferate, that you can market and scale up at near zero marginal cost. I thought the banking example was a beautiful example. And so, whether I market that app to 1,000 people or 1 billion people, the marginal cost of getting to 1 billion people is, compared to the Industrial Revolution scale-out economics, minute and zero marginal cost, or close to zero marginal cost. So it's much faster, and our human lives, the way we live our lives, and we may think of ourselves as very agile, as entrepreneurial executives. The Chinese are, frankly, in my experience, even faster and even more agile. But even at that, we are not able to keep up with the speed of change to business models, to structures in our lives, our decision processes, how we organize our lives, and the institutions in our societies that are very ill-equipped. Just think about government institutions, no offense to the mayor or anybody else, but how much sophisticated AI talent, or even medium skill AI talent, do you have in these institutions? And yet every area of life, even political life as we witnessed certainly in the United States, is being touched. So that's number one. The second one is pervasiveness, which just dovetails off the first one, as I explained. And then it's really about business models and industry being completely disrupted and taken apart. The Industrial Revolution built, and of course it changed the structure of the economy long term, but there wasn't established industry to be disrupted. Here we're now dealing with a very smart set of tools that are taking every industry apart. I have a lot of clients in automotive and industrial and infrastructure and engineering, in chemicals and consumer goods, and they're all looking at this now because they're completely seeing these 7 to 9, as we say, global digital barons. Kai-Fu called them oligarchs. Essentially absorbing these other industries. That is hugely disruptive, right? Now, on the positive side, because I told you our book is net positive, I think there is amazing opportunity for human growth to actually get to the next stage. So as part of the book, you'll see examples of how AI is enabling human beings to learn better, or to be taught better, how to diagnose our health better, how to keep loved ones from having recurrences of diseases and come to their aid much more quickly, how to solve big things like climate change and food crises, etc. So while we're looking at this very big disruption, large scale, there's also phenomenal opportunity to finally live lives that are much more purpose-bound and healthy than we have before.
Yeah, let's expand on that, because I read your book, the central theme of the book by you and Mark is really on this notion: human values and trust and power relationships are the foundation of our society. And you basically, together with Mark, actually in that book outline how AI will change that fundamentally. And so to help the audience, can give them sense what do you really mean? Can you give some example on how AI will shape these three dimensions in a way that will we really have to think the word in a different way, right? Just help us understand that.
I'd be happy to. So first one on the concept of power, which sounds very Machiavellian, and it can be, but it's really just our personal agency, our ability to make decisions and choices and to have leverage over the institutions and forces in our lives, right? Very, very important that we think very carefully about how we use AI and how our relationship with AI and with institutions and other people and commercial interests is changing. For instance, the big one is, of course, that these 7 to 9 big global internet companies are tremendously powerful, and they're gaining power through the deployment of AI. Google has, something on the order of 20 supercomputers running essentially its Google world. That's an order of magnitude more than most small countries. And essentially they know you extremely well. They don't necessarily tell you how well they know you because they don't want to scare you. Nor do they have any interest to scare you or to meta-label you in ways that doesn't align with their commercial interests. They want to sell you stuff. But we have to know that Amazon and Google know everything about you, and I think Kai-Fu gave some examples as well. But they know not just your income, your social status, and who you're connected with. They also know your basic demographics, your race, your ethnicity, your family status, what relationship you're in, not because you told them, but because they can infer from statistical correlation, all of which is being turbocharged by artificial intelligence. Including very sensitive things like your sexuality. So that's a problem if you yourself may not have explored in depth who you are, right? So we have to understand that there's tremendous power in data. And that gets me to the second point, which is it's not just about our relationship with the big internet companies. And look, I'm a business professor, I like business, I love entrepreneurs, we have many in the room. And yet we also need to get to responsible entrepreneurship, and in the era of AI, ethics is unquestionably tied at the hip with innovation. There's no more option to split those two. But the other one where this is true is that different people in societies are empowered by AI very differently. I think Kai-Fu called this data colonialism, and we agree there are countries that are not yet as digital as the United States, China, or even Europe. And who is empowered there when people don't have a digital data footprint? Even within the United States, we are socioeconomic, not just ethnically, but socioeconomically very diverse. People who don't have a healthy, strong data footprint, let's say, not the stereotype, but somebody from, I don't know, South Central LA or Central Detroit, or even, frankly, parts of East Palo Alto, who doesn't have a good data footprint will be less empowered in the future than somebody who does, because advertisers are simply not interested in them, and the data is often corrupt and biased. And we've already seen some examples with Uber and other companies. So we need to be very careful how we exercise power. On values, just look at the United States elections and the trouble that we're in with Facebook now. With all due respect to Facebook, but that has to change, right? Literally they're deploying algorithms that feed us information that's pushing us further into certain camps. So our views get more extreme, they get more elevated, our sentiments rise, and all of a sudden we start hating each other when we really should start liking and loving and understanding each other better, right? So that has a lot to do with values. And then trust is really what comes out at the bottom. How much do you trust the machine, and how much do you trust each other based on that smart machine, that AI? And if you think about it, that is the most valuable currency in society. It's not money. It's not money. We can always get more money. It's trust. Once that's gone, it's really hard to earn that back. And so I think we need to design AI that is trustworthy so we don't take our societies apart.
One thing's interesting about AI, one of the dark side of the current deep learning revolution is actually not explainable. Because I work in the healthcare for many years. One of the biggest hurdle for doctors and patients and to accept AI to begin diagnosis is what the heck is going on there. You just cannot explain because it's all stored in those millions of weights in that deep neural network. So that's definitely one area. Trust is just one of many examples of why this trust, value, and power is very important. Of course, we talked so far about AI is real. So we should pay attention, and AI actually will fundamentally shape the society, power, value, and trust, as well as what make us human. And then we also established that AI, we all believe, and AI, the scale of the change is massive. It's as big or even bigger than the Industrial Revolution. But we know when changes come, it's not always positive. There's the other side of the coin. It's dark side. And changes inevitably bring a lot of risk and even damage or destruction. And unless we actually take care of that pieces, AI would be more like a bull in the China shop, and it run full speed, but all the China, will be beautiful things that we have built in society we destroyed. So I want to ask you, you talk about Facebook, this is highly concerning for us, the investigation is still going on. And we also see, basically on AI. So how much does AI and what does AI do scares both of you? And we know also AI bots, Google, Amazon, personal data breaches, and the manipulation and so on. And what kind of safeguards can we have, right? One thing is the data breaches just now become routine. I'm a Marriott member. Just I think last week, Marriott had 500 million. Their loyal customers' data was breached, and so what scares you? And then what are some safeguards that you would advise that, or you think that we should have in place to really realizing the benefits of AI, not kind of sow the seeds for the destruction from AI?
Well, the first one, as I mentioned in my talk, is the job displacement. Not an unemployment, but people displaced from the jobs and not having the prospects of finding another. We're seeing some of the effects in the US already, in the Rust Belt and so on, but that's going to be exacerbated because more and more jobs will be displaced. And that loss of job is not going to be made up by something like universal basic income, just give them money. People have attached the meaning of their lives to their jobs. So I think I'm very concerned that when governments look at historically low unemployment number and therefore assume that job displacements aren't coming or can be fixed, I think are going to be in for a very rude surprise when, as we all know, when the technology works, it really tips. So unemployment numbers may be low now, but when it comes up, it may be unstoppable. So I think that's a big issue that will bring social stability issues. It will increase the rate of depression, the likelihood of suicide, the increase in substance abuse. So I still think that's the big one, and that's number one. Number two, I think it's a haves and have-nots. And that's both within each country, we covered that, but also between countries. While US and China, we can talk about the race all we want, but what really is the outcome is both US and China will be winners. It's the other countries that had aspirations of going from developing to developed countries, countries that wanted to follow China's model of outsourcing manufacturing, taking on that work with low-cost, low-wage people, and then gradually crawl out of poverty. Or the India model, using its English competency to do IT and call center outsourcing. But both of those sets of jobs are going to be gone in the order of 5 to 10 years, because the very fact they're outsourceable and routine means AI will do them. So the developing countries are also not aware. They're in for a very rude surprise, and their hope may not be realizable. Now, coming back to the things we normally talk about, privacy, security, data bias, the power of monopolies, I'm worried about all of them. If I were to pick one, I would say I'm most concerned about security, because AI security is not like PC or phone security, because you're not just hacking, putting software, a virus. Viruses can be detected. They're running on your phone and PC. You can trace where they come from. You can find the patterns. You can remove them. Worst case, you throw away your phone and PC, or you basically reinstall the operating system. You lose some data. But the AI could go in to steal money from the bank. All they do is switch some numbers around. Terrorists can get away from face recognition by putting things on their face that fools the recognizer, if they actually knew how the recognizer worked, how it was trained. Vehicles can become invisible by doing things to the vehicle itself or by hacking in to the data. And because you're hacking into the data, the discovery is not nearly as easy as discovering code being inserted. Imagine tens of millions of numbers in a deep learning algorithm that's updating itself anyway because it's getting more data, retraining itself. Some bad people just tweaked a few numbers, and all of a sudden, it may be out of control. It might make mistakes. It might send money to bad people. It might disclose your private data. It might hurt your health, your safety. And also imagine in the world of drones, what about the assassination drone? What about the autonomous vehicles that starts running over people, not avoiding them? So I think the massive number of security issues is the one that concerns me the most.
Yeah, one thing when I listen to Kai-Fu's talk, about moving this from this one-dimensional, from optimization to creativity to this two-dimensional, adding the compassion and love, it actually resonates deeply with me because, 7 years ago, actually, I lost my mom, and then 4 years ago, I lost my dad. It was the first time and then about around the same time, the center I was managing, the people I love dearly who work with me, and we went through a major reorganization. So there was a lot of pain and emotional challenge as me and my team adjusting to this new reality. And it was around that time because almost like 3 tsunami hit me, and I began to get in touch of my compassion side. I know you actually got into that side of the world because you are a cancer survivor. Yeah. So I basically, for the first time in my life, I felt great pain and then more in my heart, and then get kind of into touch with my emotions. And I realized, geez, I've been living my whole life, more than 40 years, in my brain, right? Good education, good job, and seems it's adequate. But until that moment, I realized how inadequate I was, right? And then how much bigger the space of the emotional space, of the compassion space, the love space I've been missing. I thought, I would not be living if I haven't got into that realm. But I really, love the way you draw, and it really give the future what defines us as a human. AI will actually force our hand to move into that realm, right? And to continue, adapt, and evolve. And so, Olaf, tell us, your point on this.
Yeah, I think the point you're raising is a great one, and it ties back into jobs, because we need to get much better at figuring out what makes us human and what makes us good at being human. There's a wonderful play on words that I could do in German I can't quite do in English that says just because you're human doesn't mean you're being good at being human. And it's a bit more elegant and interesting in German, but I won't bore you with German language. I agree with Kai-Fu Lee on the jobs front. And I think the key to that is that we are not currently training humans to be good at being human, and we're not pairing that with education broadly based. I think China is better than the United States, and the United States is better than most other parts of the world in doing this, but broadly based education on data science. And I'm not talking about coding. I actually don't know that coding is the future of our digital education, but critical reflection on data science. What does the machine do? How is it designed? What does it spit out? How does that relate to our values? But that intersection between the human side of us, love, empathy, compassion. I mean, we did crawl out of the primordial slime together millions of years ago, and we have that bond, that connection, but we're too often forced to be very mechanical. And established education systems are in part to blame for that. And so we need to get much better at educating people at the human side of things than just the mechanical, analytical, quantitative, and very linear skills. That goes for me as a business professor as well. So we definitely need to take that seriously, and I am scared, especially, I might add, I'm scared in the United States, of the United States. I think there are countries that are realizing this is a big issue. Germany has just released a new AI strategy that is much better than I thought it would be. Then the Nordic countries are getting pretty good about understanding the confluence between human development, economic development. But the United States is the big laggard. Under the current administration, I don't see how we will be prepared. I literally, and I don't mean to be party political, but I literally want to shake Mr. Trump and say it's not Mexicans, it's machines. Right? I mean, let's be very honest about this. It's the machines that will create poverty, not immigration. Right? That's a total ruse. And so we need to prepare for that, and we are not. I haven't seen anything. And the United States is big. It is still an 800-pound gorilla in the world economy. And if this country goes down the tubes, then it'll have implications in China and in the rest of the world. The second concern I have is, frankly, how we educate coders. For the first time now, Berkeley and MIT, almost at the same time, announced programs where they will teach AI and advanced data science in conjunction with things like anthropology, philosophy, sociology, psychology. Our coders, our software designers need to get an education in humanists and in natural and human sciences. They need to understand what the implications are of the code that they put out there, just like the rest of us need to get data science and coding classes, right? So that's number two. Number three that I am worried about is that we will make, you know, I'm a big fan of this mentality in the United States. That's why I came here. I'm an immigrant from Europe, and Europe tends to regulate before it seizes opportunity. In the United States, we have a slightly different proposition. Certainly in China, there's a different proposition. But what scares me this time more than anything else is that we will get it wrong at a massive scale with massive fallout, and then, and on the commercial side, a la Facebook, you know, taken to the next power, and then we will forego all this wonderful opportunity that there is to transform our societies because people will get scared. They'll stop trusting. That's what I'm scared about.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, because of time, actually I can stay here, keep asking because I have lots of questions. And you know, one thing, of course, in the news, you know, even I read the book, you know, both of the, you know, Kai-Fu and Olaf, you know, and Mark, and believe, you know, it's not about AI race, right? It's really, you know, AI. It's not between countries because AI changed the society, the people's jobs and life is so big that we need creative sort of collective solution from around the world. We can learn from each other how to handle this. But we see in the news every day it's AI race, right, between all these different countries, they're fighting. So we don't have time to expand on that, unfortunately. And also, you know, we talk about the future of healthcare a little bit, you know, government, you know, universal basic income, but it's also what about the future of education, future of transportation. There was a little bit data there. So there's a lot more. It's really touching every fabric of our life, right? And you know, we have a CU president, Bill Diamond from SETI Institute. He's sitting right there. And I thought, you know, how about using AI to help us speed up discovery of alien, you know, signals, right? Now, you know, when I was watching Star Wars, you know, years ago, I thought planet travel. There's no planet outside solar. At least we haven't observed it. And look at now. You know, we know thousands of planets, all in the last 20 years, right? So all these can be accelerated. But unfortunately, we run out of time. You know, one thing as an engineer, you know, we don't bring a problem or a manager unless you have a solution. And the good news is both of them offer the solution in the book. And I think it's quite similar, shared vision. I think in Kai-Fu's book, you know, the blueprint for how human and machine can coexist is more something called human-machine symbiosis. And then in Olaf and Mark's book, it's more talking about the symbiote intelligence. So I think this is something I wish I have time to ask questions, but I do want to respect the time, and I want to give a few questions to the audience to ask you guys before we move to the book signing. But maybe you can touch on those future also when you answer questions. So with that, I'm opening to some questions from the audience. I do want the first question come from the back. Okay. Yeah.
I'm referring to the map that you showed there. You know, essentially China, essentially being like a 2x, you know, market opportunity versus the U.S. One big void is India. Where is India? It's about the same size as China, and a pretty well-educated people. Okay, actually has democracy. Some people would say it's an advantage. Speak English. Why is India a void on this map?
Who wants to take on this?
Well, first, just empirically, there are no unicorns in India in AI. I think if you look at the reasons for success in Silicon Valley and China, a very core part is one generation teaches the other in a VC entrepreneur ecosystem. In Silicon Valley, we know the semiconductor people taught the PC people, taught the software people, taught the internet people, taught the mobile people, taught the AI people. And each generation is actually very related to the next. And then the wisdom builds up in the VCs and entrepreneurs who teach and help each other, and capital increases. So it's a virtuous cycle of people getting smarter and better and more wise, and methodologies are worked out, the ecosystem grows stronger, makes money, and more people invest. And the same thing has happened in China. So I would argue this is the very core of any other third country that wants to have that, must have a very strong VC entrepreneur ecosystem. That's the biggest issue. Now we could go into a lot of the other aspects. You know, the Chinese came up with a winner-take-all methodology, and make the system uncopyable. Silicon Valley has drawn all the immigrants and from all over the world, the smartest IQ, and the visionary change the world, make a dent in the universe. I think those kind of methodologies also are important. And then you can go into issues like many of Chinese study America and most go back. And that is a very powerful force for China. Most Indians, smart Indians come and study, and many more of them stay here. So you kept theirs, could be billionaire startups, company CEOs.
Oh,
India is behind. We did a comparative study of different countries, not just for the book, but for our client on national strategy. India is clearly behind. It's a bit of a tragedy of the cognitive era that they should be behind because they have this great asset of being software-based and having great IT education. But that is exactly the problem. It's part of what's called the developing country trap. They have a lot of installed labor that is good at IT, and therefore they're protecting that labor. So Modi has made a mistake that he has not invested years ago in artificial intelligence the way the Chinese started doing it, or the way we have done it, because he's seeking to protect 30 million coders. And many of these coders aren't sophisticated neural network coders. They are, run-of-the-mill, no offense, but undifferentiated. That's number one. Secondly, he said early on, I do not want autonomous cars in the country because cab drivers are going to lose their jobs. So again, protecting established jobs, which then prevents you from innovating to get to that next level of economic development. India is also a democracy, like you rightly point out. Democracies are messy. India is a very messy democracy. You think this is messy, try India. Right? India, honestly, India is, to me, is the most diverse country on earth, both in terms of political entities, but also in terms of cultures and ethnicities. And so it is at once beautiful because in that diversity lies innovation power, potentially, but it is also incredibly chaotic. Lastly, too many illiterate people. And that's a problem that China is not facing to the same degree, or that we're not facing, that we've overcome earlier. So the only, right now, what's starting to catch on is this Indian ID card system, but you literally have to send government workers into villages where there's a lot of illiterate people that can't read or write, much less speak English, and have to guide them through sign up for the ID card system. It's an incredibly a difficult, tedious process. And we're not talking about a couple of tens of millions. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people, right? So that's the difference.
thank you. So let's do two more questions. Candy, you have a question.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed all three of the comments. Dr. Lee, I wonder if you could just make a few extra comments about the parallel universe that you described. Is that compatible forever? Are there geopolitical repercussions? Is that sort of thing? Would you mind expanding on that just a bit?
Sure. What I really mean is that the users' habits have changed. So they're not a one-for-one anymore. In a copycat world, it's you have a search engine, we have a search engine. You have an e-commerce, we have e-commerce. They largely look alike, so therefore they're more interchangeable. The fabric of the Chinese software ecosystem is now different. The WeChat as a social network is actually extremely different from Facebook. The way in which you promote, the power of the company, the types of capabilities there are. So essentially, you don't have two cylinders that can be cut and says, this is one of those, this is one of those. So the challenge for any American company to go to China would mean you have to learn a completely different way to build your app, your compatibility, your interoperability with other apps, the assumption of how users are, how the user's mind thinks in terms of when I want to buy something, I do this. When I want to use a service, I do that. It's all changed. So it's a consumer behavior, it's brands, it's different classes of products. So the interoperability is very low. So I think the challenge this brings about is that crossing over would be extremely difficult. Whether there are geopolitical implications, possibly. So in terms of the future, one thing often people criticize about the Chinese companies is, well, it's just in China. U.S. is global. But I think the Chinese companies are actually going quickly global. It's just that you don't see it because when the Chinese companies go global, they don't come to America, nor do they come to developed countries. So you don't see that. And one of the interesting power of China is that it's not all the same. There are actually many tiers of Chinese users. There's the sophisticated users, there's the countryside young users, there's the countryside older users, and their habits actually are different. So these new apps that are being created, that are innovative, are often targeting non-so-called mainstream American type of users, of which there are maybe 300 million in China, but there are also 600 million different users. And the Chinese new innovative apps often target them first and then go mainstream. And then a side effect of that is that these new users that are non-mainstream in America are actually demographically very similar to Southeast Asia, to African users over time. So my prediction is the Chinese ecosystems will gain increasing acceptance in Southeast Asia and Africa for sure, India possibly, South America possibly, Middle East probably. So this will end up with the American ecosystem really just remaining strong in the developed world. So this means the Silicon Valley old mentality in the Wintel days that the whole world revolved around Silicon Valley innovation will bifurcate into a world where maybe half of it is US primary, half of it might be Chinese primary. There are a lot of details that I can't go into right now. So I do think that requires a different thinking in terms of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and the view of the global technological dominance. I guess the final interpretation may be what Eric Schmidt has said, which is there will be two internets with different regulations and data protection and nationalism. I think that assumption is still speculative right now. I don't see the evidence that will happen, but I guess we also can't rule it out.
Yeah. So maybe Olaf, you want to give a quick comment, or?
I'll try to be really quick because I know we have to close out.
Yeah.
In fact, the rise of the two models is what we hope to write the second book on, because that is exactly, I think, where the world is going, and it is at once tremendously powerful in terms of economic development, and it is also very scary because where this could go is essentially two political models competing with each other. I like Fu don't like the term race because it's very zero-sum. But the way this could play out geoeconomically, geopolitically, is that China's model replicates very well or can be adapted very well throughout, let's say, its Belt and Road Initiative of 65 countries, 46% of global GDP. That's massive, right? And you probably know the Belt and Road Initiative, and then countries like Venezuela and elsewhere. And that the American model in adaptation, because we obviously have seen abuses recently, will work better for democracies. And then you have two evolving camps, and I think that's a tragedy. I have chat envy. When I go to China, and I go frequently to teach and research, what WeChat does is amazing. I mean, I'm envious. I'd love more of that. That isn't going to happen if we have this competition of two models happening, one along the non-democratic and the other one along the one that has a lot of democratic sensibilities, right? I wish we had more Chinese applications here, but that's not currently the way it's playing out, and that's really unfortunate.
Okay, thank you. Despite the time, I wish there are more questions, but we're running out of time, and so I do want to close the panel. And before we really close, I want to have you each have 60 seconds, give the audience a key takeaway they want, from the book or yourself about AI of the future, and then we'll close for real. Have we start?
Sure. I think we heard a lot about the opportunities from AI and the dangers from AI. Olaf and I both take an optimistic view, and obviously we're also very cognizant of the dangers. And I think my closing remark is that I fully recognize the dangers. And I think we have to choose to be optimistic, because the view in which we view the world will likely become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we all tell ourselves AI is going to take our jobs away, humans have no future, and we should just hide in our homes and forget about getting a job, then humanity will have no future. But if we become optimistic and seek ways in which to overcome the problems of security, job displacement, think about the value of compassion, think about the opportunities for humanity, and think about the opportunities AI could bring about, and think about all the dividend from AI and how it could be used, then we will, and what that belief will too become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's not that I don't see the dangers, but I think as thought leaders, we really have to take the high road, because if more people believe in the optimistic future, then that is the outcome that we will have.
Thank you, Careful. Olaf, what's your key takeaway for our audience?
Yeah, I would say definitely focus on the symbiosis between you and the machine, and ask yourself, where is your human strength? And if you're a leader in industry, in a company, think about what this means for how you lead, how you develop people. What kinds of skills do you teach them that are innately human that we need to sharpen and get much better at, rather than making humans objectifiable machines? That is not what we're good at. We will never succeed at that. And AI can be used either way. Okay, so make that choice, understand that symbiosis really well. Second recommendation is get involved, meaning look at AI as a tremendous and huge opportunity with a positive lens in front of your eyes. At the same time, don't be blind, don't be naive. Look at the interests behind AI, avoid the objectification, right? And get involved on safeguarding it. Make it safe so we can get to the new horizon. In the book we're talking about, we need to have a Congress, a multi-stakeholder Congress across borders. It's not an AI scientist-led, government-led, corporate-led. All of these need to be at the table. But we need to sort of not go bottom up or top down, but middle, up, and down, meaning we need to work with foundations, with academia, and pull in all these other interests and make that a global multi-stakeholder Congress, including China. Many people in the West say, oh, we need to get our act together as the West first before we take on a dialogue with China. And I disagree. Because I think then we are in this world of the two worlds, and that'll be really hard to stomach. So at the end of that needs to be what we have dubbed a digital Magna Carta that respects different value systems and safeguards AI, right? But now we need to do these two in tandem, opportunity and governance. You can't have one without the other.
Bravo. With that, I cannot have a better stopping point, and I really appreciate all of you coming this morning, make the time worthwhile. And I do hope with all of you can take something away that will go back to your work and life and view the future of your work and life differently. And then and prepare yourself, and also people you can influence and you lead into this era of AI, and then write our own script, right? And both of you that's that. So with that, I really appreciate it, and of course, hopefully it's piqued your interest for the books, because we do have it's now the end of the event, and so there's a book signing, there's a photo opportunity, and so you can, get the book, read it, and so in any case, let's give a round of applause to the